I would say that the moments I'm proudest of would be the effort assisting Baker to try to put together a Madrid peace conference, which for the first time around the same table created a direct bilateral negotiation between Israel and the Palestinians and Israel and Syria, and inaugurated a decade of negotiation, the 90s, which was the only decade in the last half of the last century not to witness a major Arab-Israeli war. 48, 56, 67, 82. The 90s came and went without a major conflagration. That was in part a consequence of what Baker did at Madrid, what the Israelis and the Palestinians tried to do at Oslo, what we tried to do to help them, the Israeli-Jordanian peace treaty in 1994, Israeli-Syrian negotiations that continued for almost a decade without an agreement, and a couple interim accords that we put together in 96 and 98 after Rabin was murdered in order to save what remained of the last vestiges of Oslo. And that did, in fact, defer or delay the inevitable confrontation between Israelis and Palestinians that broke out in the fall of 2000, the Second Intifada, from which their relationship is not yet fully recovered. So no, I think if I took pride in anything, it's that it's participating and enabling, helping Arabs and Israelis to avoid a major conflict during that decade, which is no small achievement given the realities that there had been a war in every other previous decade since the State of Israel was created.
Your past, through your assignment, have had you observe, come close to, deal with some significant political figures. Is there one or two historic role models, folks that you'd say, like Rabin, you mentioned him, you'd say there was a special person who could have made a difference or did make a difference?
Well, I mean, I knew Rabin and had tremendous respect for him because he was, to me, a transformed hawk. And that transformation was important. All of these leaders, Hussein, Sadat, Begin, Rabin, and of course John Kerry would argue that maybe Netanyahu is the last in the series, traveled a fair amount on an ideological journey which changed them. And this capacity to change, this is really the key. Because change is hard, particularly when you are responsible and have obligations not only to your constituency, you're locked in a historic conflict. You want to secure your role and place in history. You certainly don't want to betray or violate the kind of fiduciary responsibilities of government that you've been given, whether you're an authoritarian leader or a democratically elected one. So you're presented with a possibility of change, which requires risk, which in the case of Sadat and Rabin meant existential risk. I mean, they paid with their lives for what they did. So that stretching, that's extremely important, and I think is the key to everything. And by the way, it may not be transformative change. It may not be some religious or political epiphany. It's what I call transactional change. You realize that for your purposes, the purposes of the nation, for the good of the nation, you need to adjust your approach to reach an agreement. And that is really hard, because anything in this region that gets done gets done after an excruciatingly painful process. Interim agreement, final status agreement, convening of a peace conference in Madrid, 3 days in Madrid, that was it. Led to a decade of ongoing negotiation. Took 9 months, prospects of failure throughout. So I think that's, and Baker in the beginning wasn't interested, I mean, because he understood the risks. He changed too. So that's what I think is important for politicians. Learning, adjusting, not just for politicians, but that's for the rest of us too.
Historian, diplomat, if you had an opportunity to sit down and have dinner, 2-hour dinner with somebody in history, to really pick their brain, to learn about how they made a difference, who would it be?
Well, there's only one person. I mean, I'm now finishing a new book called Can America Have Another Great President? ? It would be Lincoln. Mm-hmm. Our undeniably greatest president. A man who suffered, lost several of his children, presided over an enterprise which involved the greatest number of casualties any American war. Suffered probably from depression, found joy nonetheless, and in the end understood what was necessary. Combining, drawing on what was best from the past, understanding the present, and yet trying to fashion a policy that would endure for the future. This is an extraordinary accomplishment. And, you know, a man who was a wartime president from the day he was inaugurated to the day of his death, it would be Lincoln. And not because I mean, it would be nice to believe, and Spielberg made a brilliant movie, but I do not believe that Lincoln is even that relevant for our time. Circumstances were so idiosyncratic, so different. The country so profoundly different that, you know, it would just be an effort to truly engage with someone who is undeniably great and change the country forever for the better.
If Lincoln's not as relevant as probably most people would think, but is Nick Carraway the most relevant person today as far as Middle East policy?
Well, Nick Carraway, I forgot I actually compared myself to Nick Carraway in this book. Nick Carraway, in a way, Nick Carraway is, because Nick Carraway was part of the story, and yet he was capable of a certain degree of detachment and making observations about the story. And you know something? If you could figure out a way to have people invested, and yet at the same time be capable of analytical detachment, it would actually be the marriage of two qualities. I think that would be very important for today, for problem solving, for making the world a better place.
So everybody should watch The Great Gatsby. So everybody should watch The Great Gatsby.
Yeah, maybe Gatsby is the relevant tale here.